Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the Latino Vote podcast, where we talk about beautiful brown people and the importance of the Latino vote all across the country. Mike Madrid, some would even say the Latino century.
Well, that was a nice subtle plug there, Chuck. I need to start holding up the book to product placement. That's what it's called, right?
Look, you got to go. Pitch. I know you've been out there talking about the book.
Book tour started, man. It's kind of started in earnest this week, so I will be on the road a lot. Posting a lot of pictures, lots of events set up, lots of media. I won't be as present on the media as Chuck is on a normal week, but I'm going to do my best to kind of catch up to him.
Look, I do what my papa says. I plow a wide girth when I'm plowing. So if you want to get in behind the tractor, there's a lot of ground being turned over. I don't know if that lands with you, city boy.
I don't think I understood a word that you just said, but I'm going to take your word for it, that it's meaningful and appropriate. What are you seeing out there? I mean, there's a lot going on.
It's primary day. Primary. Last night, and we'll get to the Oregon primaries here in a minute. But before we get to the Oregon primaries, last Tuesday, there was a big primary here in Washington, D.C. And for all of our listeners, and you know what, Mike? Every week I'm surprised because somebody else walks up to me and they're like, hey, man, I listen to the podcast, love the podcast. And I just forget we do a podcast until I'm outside of the house where people are like, love the podcast, Chuck. You and Mike are doing great stuff. So anyway, thanks to all the fans and folks that are posting about the podcast and talking about the podcast in a positive light. In DC, for anybody who's around, and there's a lot of us, over the last, Mike, I think it's been almost a year, a congressman in Maryland who's decided to run for an open Senate seat has been running TV commercials in the two media markets, which are Baltimore and DC, for almost a year. And his name is David Trone. Evidently, David Trone made a little money in his lifetime because he opened up a liquor store that got to be really big. That's called like Wine and Spirits or something, but they're all over. And there's a lot of money to be made, evidently, in the liquor business. I could have told anybody that is one of the things that never go out of style. And I'll leave the other category out. But liquor, and he made a lot of money. But long story, before I tell this big wind-up, let me just get to the punchline. David Trone spent $60 million on TV ads for a year running in an open Senate race against a Black woman who is the county executive of one of the southern counties right next to D.C., who had no money. She may have raised a couple $1 million, started her media in the last 30 days, and I'll get to more and answer your questions in a minute. Emily's List came in, and the funny thing that I saw that I want to talk to you about, because I wanted to bring this up because I think there's a right and a wrong way to run campaigns, and I was telling Mike before we started, normally whoever spends the most money wins, normally in a regular race. They said that she was getting outspent, Mike. I'm telling you this, so I want to hear your comments. She was outspent for like 9 of the 10 or 11 months leading up to the election, 25-1 on TV, 25-1. Now, Emily's List, the women backpack, came in the last 8 weeks and cut that margin down where they're only being outspent 2-1. And on election day, Mike, he didn't lose by a little bit. He lost by a lot. And I think it's a lesson in politics of you can't always just spend a lot of money and win an open Democratic House seat or Democratic Senate seat when they're not just people watching TV. What do you think?
Being in California here, where the country touches the water on the other side of the country, we have a very long history of rejecting self-financing candidates. We got a lot of rich people here in California, and every couple of years, one or two of them wakes up and says, I want to be governor. And it goes back to a guy named Al Checky in 1998, who was an airline executive, spent over $100 million. Meg Whitman spent, I think they're still counting how much money she spent, $130 million of her own money.
Wait, Mike, wasn't there a rich guy that ran for like LA mayor?
Rick Caruso just ran for mayor against Karen Bass.
He spent a lot of money, right?
He spent, I think he spent $60 million to be mayor.
Wow.
Mayor. So, there's a lot of chatter about him running for governor now, too. Bill Simon ran for governor, independently wealthy. Arnold Schwarzenegger won here, but Arnold Schwarzenegger kind of transcended the money. He was kind of the biggest celebrity on the planet when he decided to run for governor of California. But California has been littered with bodies of rich guys, primarily guys that think that they can just kind of buy their way into this. Now there will be, we'll test this theory again. Our lieutenant governor, Eleni Sakopoulos, is from a very wealthy Greek family, very big Democratic family. She herself was an ambassador to somewhere in Eastern Europe. I think it's more of a negative than a positive. I think people really resent the fact that folks come in with these slick commercials at the end and inundate them, and they can smell it and they don't like it and they soundly reject it. I'm not sure that was what was happening there, but when you're running commercials a year out, you can just see the money cycle start when you're not moving the needle. And then so you spend $1 gazillion on another message, on another campaign, and the numbers don't move again. And pretty soon you're throwing good money after bad, and all you're doing is making your consultant rich and buying them a couple extra vacation homes in Europe and Southeast Asia. So, you know, and look, I'm biased on this. We should probably have another show on it at some point, but everybody who is not in this business, and I know that's going to sound very self-serving, but stick with me, believe that if you limit the amount of money that comes into the system, it somehow is going to make the system better. This system is actually quite self-regulating. People are not dumb. The voters are not dumb. Will they make a bad decision every once in a while? Sure, they will. I mean, we elected Donald Trump. Of course it happens. But the truth of the matter is, people are extraordinarily intuitive. They may not be able to explain the way a bill becomes a law precisely, or what Senate bill, congressional bill, or whatever that is that they're working on, or who's likely to vote which way in the House or the Senate. But I'll tell you what, they've got a very keen understanding of who these people are that we work for and work with. And you throw money on top of that, and I will tell you right now, I just think money is overrated. It's just way overrated in this business. And let me, before I toss it back, sorry, you got me started here, but before I toss it back, I always hear people saying, well, you know, we got to get money out of politics. And so then I ask them the question, how much money, how many ads would I have to show you to vote for Donald Trump, to convince you to vote for Donald Trump? And I have never yet met a person who has said, oh, well, I mean, sure, I could change my mind on that. And if anything can be used to explain how money and commercials and influence simply cannot change some things, it's that. So, you know, we need to be mindful of it. It can't be just the Wild West, but we got to get over this idea that somehow money in politics is buying power. I think it's just complete bullshit. And money is going to get into the system no matter what you have, whether it's a democracy or an oligarchy or some sort of authoritarian regime. That's what money does. It gets attracted to power. The best way to regulate it is to allow open transparency, let the sunlight in, but quit trying to stop limiting money. Just stop it. It doesn't work. It's never proven to work. And it's just kind of this easy fix for a problem that is much deeper than the river runs. How's that? Did I sound like a cowboy?
No, that was terrible. If you look at the races, though, you can take money in or out of politics. There's one thing that is true. I think Mike talked about a lot of exceptions to the rule, especially these rich dudes trying to buy seats in California. But in 90, 95, I could go pull up these numbers. Normally in a race, whoever spends the most money wins. It's just how the game is played. Now, how that money's regulated, if it's a public financing, is there super PACs, like normally who spends the most money? Not always. It's something to watch on the presidential election because Donald Trump has to spend so much of his money on legal bills. He's not actually going to have to go talk to voters, but Donald Trump's an anomaly. Everybody knows him. He don't have to build name ID. Everybody knows I'm working on a city council race in D.C. for my lovely soon-to-be wife, and I'm 13 days out. And I've spent a lot of time building her name ID for a woman that literally nobody in this ward knew. So it can be done. We've spent the most money, but now there's big outside PACs coming in, Mike. We haven't even talked about this. There's 2 outside PACs coming in who each individually will spend more money than any single candidate will spend in the election. Now, will that have an impact? I know it will, but will it have enough of an impact? I think we'll talk about that when we break down the Ebony Payne race after the election is over. I don't want to go too deep. I had this whole thing written down about Maryland, but you made me think about something that you'll know more about. And let's stay on this money theme. because I remembered I wanted to ask you about it. I was going to text you this morning. I forgot. So I'm going to cold ask you a question that I didn't prep you for, which is the leadership fund, which is the Republican House Super PAC, put down their media buy this morning. You probably haven't seen it. It's like really early in California right now. We do this when Mike's just getting up before he has his coffee. But it shows by market where they've bought all their TV spin reservation holds for the fall. And of course, there's a big buy in New York City. There's a big buy in LA because of all those congressional seats around those two big media markets. Right. And they'll split that up amongst 3 or 4 races. But the one I want to flag for you and hear your comment on, and it just kind of in a group chat with Democratic operatives this morning, they were talking about how they draw a moat around the Central Valley. Mm-hmm. But you should know that the Republican Leadership Conference, I think they call it, you'll know more than me, put down $21 million of TV advertising hold in the Central Valley, Mike.
That's got to encompass those 2 congressional districts. That's got to control John Duarte's seat and also David Valadeo's further south in the valley. That's a lot of money, but it also, it could say 2 things. It could say that they're worried about it and they're going to defend it, or it means they're really worried about it and they're going to defend it. But the bottom line is that they're going to defend. By the way, $21 million in the Central Valley of California.
Tell him, Mike.
It's not like $21 million in LA or New York.
Tell him, Mike. It's like $1 bazillion in LA.
It's like $1 bazillion. $21 million. I've never heard of that much money going into the Central Valley ever. So there's going to be some really happy TV stations. But what did you guys make of it? What did the Dems make of it?
Yeah, it's broken up between Fresno and Bakersfield. It'll take in the 2. And what people are saying is like, I think it's also it encompasses what we talk about. It's the Latino vote. Obviously, we can talk a lot about these voters. We talk about the Central Valley. We're going to talk about these 2 races ad nauseum. But it also shows that, there's a lot going on, and that even though that David Valadeo, right, Mike, he was the last person that voted for the impeachment or something, right? Like he's the last one standing.
He voted against Donald Trump.
Right. Yeah. And so all those other folks who voted against Donald Trump have all been beat at some level, I think.
Yeah.
So some people had said this morning, I was watching some of the pundits on Twitter talking about how they had always assumed that Valadeo got all of his money and support because his district was right next to McCarthy's district, and he thought they were buds. And so McCarthy would go out of his way to earmark more money for Valadeo because he's his boy. Well, this shows with McCarthy gone, they're still as committed to Valadeo, knowing for everybody at home, this is like a D plus 4, 5, 6, all depending on what you look at. I think Biden and Hillary probably carried this race in double digits, y'all. And it's almost an 80% Latino seat. It's the highest seat of non-college educated people of any color in America that is still marginal. That means most of those states that have so much non-educated, I don't say that, non-college educated folks are already safely are. But this is one of those rare districts where there's a ton of Latinos, very rural, not a lot of college graduates. And if I would have been a smart man 10 years ago, I'd have just bought an ABC or NBC channel in Fresno and been retired by the time I was 35, right, Mike?
I don't know about that, because in the off season you can buy commercials for like $15.
Oh, that's right.
Dumb. There's not a whole lot of money that flows into the valley, but it is remarkable how far the dollar goes there on TV. I don't know if they showed the radio buys too, if you guys are taking a look at that, but keep an eye on that. Radio, that's the secret weapon in the Central Valley of California, is Spanish language radio. All radio, but Spanish specifically. That's how you talk to these Latinos, because Latino vote down there in the Duarte district, Valadeo district, is very different than it is in Orange County or Mike Garcia's seat, where they're much more suburban, English dominant, English exclusive. So you look, David Valadeo's seat is very interesting. To me, I call it the Texas of California, because it's very much like demographically what you would envision Texas to be, but it's also where Democrats think they're going to get a seat all the time, and on paper it looks like they should get it, and they got it in 2018 in the big Democratic blue wave, but it went right back in 2020, and it's always been a seat that demographically, and I mean for 15, 20 years, looks like Democrats should have picked up, and they got it one time and it went right back. I think both seats, by the way, are getting more, they're getting more Republican. Not just the voters in that district, but the Latino voters are shifting to the right. You and I talked about this last year, and I put the Duarte seat on your radar, saying a Republican's going to win this seat. And I don't even think it was on your list. You're like, what the hell?
No, it was not even something I was looking at.
He hasn't had his coffee yet, and he's getting old and rusty up there. The wheels,
all those things.
But Duarte, their campaign was calling me saying, "Hey, we're hitting 50% with Latino voters." I was like, "No, you're not. That doesn't happen in California." And after the third call, I said, "Well, let me take a look at your tab and see what you got." And lo and behold, I was like, hot damn, the Republicans are going to win this seat. And they did. And the question is going to be, can they hold it? If I'm a betting guy, I bet they hold it. I think that they do hold it. I think they hold both. We'll get into specific seats later on. But those are two key districts to watch in this country. And we're going to be talking a lot about them because they overlap considerably with very large Latino votes and red rural America. And the question becomes, are Latinos in red rural seats starting to look like red rural voters, or are they going to continually look more distinct the way they have in the past 15 years? And what does that mean for the next 15 years?
I think that this will be the one where we'll see if Mike is right or Chuck is right, because I do think that Democrats have learned their lesson. I think they're being more intentional. I think that you look at the choice issue. There's three big things that jumps out at me about these two races. I'm not disputing what Mike is saying as being fact. I just think that with Lucy and the football, you start figuring out what Lucy's doing with the football. And so I think that you combine choice and the way women are being motivated. You combine that Latinos doing more specifically in Spanish and to reach out to Latino working class going, okay, we've messed this up 2, 3, 4 times. Let's do something different. And then the third thing is, what is the presidential? And this could be a plus or a minus, to be honest, with Donald Trump on the top of a ticket in a place like this with literally anything could happen in the next 6 months where he could go shoot somebody in Times Square. Joe Biden could have a heart attack. I mean, I wouldn't wish that on anybody. And I'm just saying, I'm giving you the extremes of both. Literally, Joe Biden having a heart attack or Donald Trump shooting somebody in Times Square. So those are, for those of you judging us out there, I'm using both contrast of absurdities showing what could actually happen. But either one of those could literally happen. And so what does that do to a seat where there's all these Latinos? So I think that's what I'm going to keep my eye on. Mike, I want to jump to Oregon. They had their primaries last night. And in Oregon, this is the Latino Vote podcast. Chuck, what does that Oregon have to do with a bunch of tree huggers up in Portland, a bunch of hairy-legged women, and a bunch of dudes up there with green spray paint in their hair or whatever else? I'm using euphemisms for both sexes, so all of y'all, rest of y'all can kiss my ass. I'm not showing one way or the other.
That's Chuck. That's Chuck talking. That's not Mike Madrid, but go ahead, Chuck.
There's a Latina. You may not know this, but there's a Latina congresswoman in Oregon. Lori Chavez-DeRemer, won a seat that is a D+3 seat from the Democrats. Whoa. And she represents Oregon's 5th congressional district. And she won uncontested her primary last night. But this is a seat to keep an eye on. If Republicans could keep a Latina, which they really need for lots of reasons, on their team in the House. Now, ironically, in this race was really something different, Mike, and I'm going to give you probably new news. But the woman who had run the last time, who Chavez had beaten, the DCCC came out. Very rare do they get involved in primaries, and ran ads against the former member in supporting her opposition, which was a black state senator named Laurie Bynum. So now this Bynum won, and I mean, she won by a lot. I mean, in Oregon, it's kind of like California. Good liberals, they're going to count votes for a week, but she's up like 30 grand, like it's 30,000 votes to 60,000 votes. So it sets up a competition between a black female state senator against a Latina white Republican woman in a D+. I looked this morning just to double check my numbers. One said D+2, another one said D+4 seat. When you have a decent sized Latino population, but the Latino vote will have an impact, but it's less than 10%, but more than 5%. But, I think it has more to do with, what do you call it? When you can see Republicans need female Latinas in Congress to say, look, ladies, we have Latinas in our ranks. And I think it's important. Symbolism is the word I'm looking for. That's what, Mike, symbolism for them. What do you think about that?
Word for the day.
Symbolism.
So who do you think wins, Chuck?
Dude, I don't know. I just knew that the other candidate who got beat, I've been told, and I didn't work on the race, this is just all secondhand with other operatives, that she was pretty flawed. So the Democrats went in and picked somebody in the primary.
Okay.
Now, for all of you listening, that's a big deal for the DCCC to go in and run ads in a primary against another Democrat.
Yeah.
So they thought that this black woman, who was a state senator, and she is really impressive. Like she is smart. She knows all of her shit. She's looking at candidates. I was watching her acceptance speech last night. I see why they backed her, because she was very, very impressive. So you put her up against the Congresswoman, Ms. Chavez-DeRemer, and I think it's a 50-50 shot when you don't have any presidential campaigns of either side going to be running ads in Oregon,
So the dynamics of this race, I think the takeaway here is fascinating, because what you have is the intersection of racial politics, identity politics, partisanship, and economic class. Because is this an urban seat, or is it kind of a suburban?
It's the suburbs of Portland.
It's the suburbs. Yeah. See, so this gets even more interesting. I'm actually doing a project in Orange County right now. I'll be talking about it on the show in a little bit. That it shows as non-white people are moving into the suburbs, we have to really reconsider all of our understandings of racial voting blocks, because black voters, brown voters, Asian voters all start to vote a little bit more as college educated, because they're college educated suburbs. That's how you get into the burbs. And the question becomes, are they voting more culturally, more racially and ethnically, or more as an economic class voter? And the intersection of all three of those three get really, really complicated. And I love the fact that you brought this seat up, because a race like this is a precursor of things to come. This is the way politics is going to be practiced in America going forward as we become a more diverse society. And as more and more non-white people go to college, and as the suburbs become more diverse. It's not just the urban core that's diverse, and the suburbs and the rural areas are very white. We're now seeing suburbs, places like Gwinnett, DeKalb County outside of Atlanta, Orange County, California, northern Los Angeles County, here obviously in the suburban periphery of Oregon. You were talking a little bit about Gary, Indiana last week, which is a little bit more urban, but in the collar counties surround it, getting more diverse. So the idea, the traditional notion and idea of what a minority is and minority voting behavior is going to change. And this is the perfect example. You have the DCCC going in, pushing a black woman through the Democratic primary to face off with a Latina Republican in the burbs. How did the Latino vote play there? Not the same way it's going to play in what we were just talking about, David Valadeo's or John Duarte's district, for sure.
Or the black vote. This is a 90% white district.
Yeah. Yeah, fascinating. So how do white voters split? Is there an educational split? Clearly there'll be a partisan split, but that's a great race to do some examination on, to kind of, do an autopsy on afterwards and see who did what and why, what messages were working. Because both campaigns, both parties are going to really have to learn to do things differently than they have been doing over the past couple of decades.
I think you're right. And then if you look at this district, crime and upheaval in Portland is a big part of this. These folks have moved out of the city center. They've moved out to the burbs. They're trying to have a quiet community. And there's all these movements like within the city to recall DAs and all the things that are going on with legalizing drugs. And so I think that, again, a snapshot of all the things that could be happening around the country. I live in D.C., in a neighborhood that's been really changing. There's a lot more crime been happening, and there's a lot of, stigma and stuff that's been hung over from the pandemic. I mean, there's a lot of folks, like you said, I think that it's going to be really interesting to watch. Let me bring up the last point for the podcast today, and then we'll hit on some topics. Is there's been a lot of talk about VP for Trump. And this week I got a call from a couple reporters and other people that posed a question to me that I want to pose to you. We've watched all these Republicans go up and kiss the ring or the butt of the president in New York with their red ties and going up there and doing all the things. And there was the Latina from Miami out there speaking Spanish yesterday in front of the courthouse in New York City. All these folks more or less trying out for being VP or wanting to make America know that they're with him. But the thing that was poised to me is, would it be good or would it be bad if Donald Trump picked somebody like a Marco Rubio to be his VP? And what would that do to Latino support for or against Donald Trump?
I got a reporter with that same call a few days ago. I don't know if Marco moves the needle for him for a couple of reasons. The main one being he's a Cuban from Florida. And I always kind of dismissed the Cuban, Mexican, Venezuelan, El Salvadorian, Puerto Rican differences. But I'm going to say this now for the first time probably in my career. I think those differences are really going to start mattering now. Like the Latino vote, as it gets bigger and more diverse, those distinctions really do matter in a way that they did not. When you're a smaller minority, it's easier to just be like, oh, okay, you kind of overlook some of these things. I'll give you the perfect example. The Asian Pacific Islanders. Anybody can basically be in that caucus, and they're all okay with it. You can be from, you can be Korean, Japanese, Chinese,
Indian,
East from the Indian subcontinent. It is extraordinary how many people they're just like, yeah, come on in, right? And we're not like that as Latinos, but we're going to become increasingly less like that. So here's my argument for why Rubio he may get, and who the hell knows what Donald Trump's going to do. But Rubio, I don't think brings anything. And he doesn't bring anything because what he would bring is Cubans and Florida. And they've already got that. They've got that locked down. They don't need to overperform with Cubans anymore. They've got where they're making strides, where they're making this rightward shift is with Mexicans. If you can move Mexicans 3, 4, 5 points, which the polling is saying that's where they're at, this race it's probably Donald Trump's. And boy, it's going to be a hell of an episode if on November 6th of this year, we have the Latino Vote podcast and we have to explain to folks why it is that Latinos put Donald Trump back into the White House. Now, and another shameless plug, but I explore this in the Latino Century. I explore this in the book because that's to me, that's a coin toss. It's a very likely possibility. I just don't think Rubio is the guy that is going to compel people that are already moving in that direction to get there. The problem is, I don't think that there's another high-profile enough person of Mexican ancestry, Mexican descent that you can put on the ticket. I'm also not convinced he runs with a politician. I think he may just run with a celebrity or an athlete or something like that. That's kind of the Trump way. Dr. Oz, Carrie Lake, Herschel Walker, J.D. Vance, these characters that have never held public office before, but find some level of D-level fame, C-level fame, and he throws them on as a politician to run. And every once in a while it hits, he hit it. But I don't know. What do you think? Does Rubio bring anything that he doesn't already have?
Let me give you a long answer. No. I just don't believe it. I think that people vote for Trump because they love Trump, or they vote for Joe Biden because they hate Trump. I think anybody that's number 2 on that ticket is a sideshow. Now, if you have an unnamed Latino surname candidate in a state house race somewhere and a Latino walks in and they see Rubio and they don't know candidates, Latinos will pick a Latino surname, no matter what party they're part of, most of the time in a low information race. But for president, like Mike, you have said 100 times, people know Joe Biden. People damn sure know Donald Trump. And Rubio brings nothing extra. Does he help deliver something? No. To your point, Cubans will love it. They'll have parades. They'll name babies after him. That's great. But there's nothing new there, right? And so can he speak Spanish and go on TV? Sure. But there'd be surrogates that are way more famous than Marco Rubio that could do that would move people more. You want to talk to Latinos, get Bad Bunny out talking to people about you or some other iconic Latino artist and do all of that. And for all my friends back home, they know I like to call him the Rabbit, but his name is Bad Bunny. He is the highest selling artist and most downloaded artist of any genre. Again, to Mike's Latinization of America. You probably read about that in his book as well. Hell, you can read about everything else in there. Let me also talk about a race in Baltimore that I want to highlight before we get out of here today. Is there was a mayor's race in Baltimore, and I like to find these little nuggets. And there was an African-American mayor that stood beside the African-American, we talk about Wes Moore, he's the governor, when the ship horribly ran into that into the bridge.
Yeah.
And I'd also like to highlight there was a lot of Latinos on that bridge and immigrants working on that bridge, fixing potholes like they do in bridges every night, that died on that bridge, that we should talk about as well, and their families, and how Latinos every night, back shifts, keeping America going again, janitors cleaning buildings in the middle of the night, like they got killed because they were doing their job, trying to make, the American dream that they all came here for. But because of that catastrophe, the mayor of Baltimore got to get up there, and the Republicans attacked him as being the DEI mayor and all the things that they like to do. But there was a real operation to oust him with a Republican guy who had bought a bunch of Sinclair stations in Baltimore, who were backing another African-American woman and a former mayor. So he had a real race. And I think I bring that big, long thing up to tell you that one of our former employees, a Latino named Nick Machado, a Brazilian of all things, who moved from Florida to Baltimore, Mike. And these are the stories that you love. Many years ago, started working locally in the local Democratic Party. But that young man managed that race for Baltimore mayor in a majority black city, where you had two black candidates. But he had worked and helped elect a DA in Baltimore in the last cycle when he got done with that primary, because primaries are pretty much all they are in Democratic cities. A friend had turned me on to Nick, and I'd brought him into the firm. And last cycle, he was one of our, like we call, temporary associates for the last 4 months, handling several of our campaigns and clients. And he's a great individual, great young man. And he went back to Baltimore and, started working for this nonprofit, but got picked up because he knew this mayor and he had won a DA race. And, I'm flagging that as when me and Mike talk about Latinos shouldn't be stereotyped into be just working on races in the Central Valley. To Mike's point about that Oregon race, where there's a black woman and a Latina running in a white seat, you had a Latino managing a mayor's race in Baltimore this week that won, where there were millions of dollars spent behind him, and he'll now can run a congressional race or a Senate race. I think there should be a lot more of that when me and Mike are saying, find those little stories of where Latinos and Latinas are working, doing things that are extraordinary that you don't think of, because I think this is the platform we should be highlighting, Mike. Don't you agree?
I do agree. And I think that that's a big part of the story as it unfolds that we kind of, I think, try to visit with here on the podcast. I want to adjust to another story if I could. And
sure.
I know we're running out of time, but
no, we got good.
Does it help or hurt if Donald Trump is acquitted next week? I don't know. I mean, Fox News called yesterday and said, "Hey, we all, let's run down both sides of the road here. Let's say he's convicted, right? He's not going to jail for this stuff." Right. But the hammer could come down pretty significantly on. What does that mean? But what does it mean if he's acquitted? I mean, I think
I've sat and thought about it myself. I think if it's acquitted, it helps him tremendously. I think it does, because folks that you don't know, not Mike Madrid, but most of us don't know folks who are on the fence about Donald Trump. They either love him or hate him. But there is a small sliver of people. And all you need is a small sliver in Michigan, in Wisconsin, or Pennsylvania to make a big difference, that are really going to make a decision. And it gives a great talking point, not to the masses, y'all, not to 90% of America has a corner, and they're in their corners dug in. But there's a little part of America be like, see there, we knew that he didn't do nothing. See there, like this is just more. I've been watching Fox News. They've been calling this a witch hunt. Like this, mama, get in the truck. Like I told you, we got to go vote for Donald Trump because he's a little crazy, and gas has come down and eggs have come down. But I think it gives them the permission to go and vote for him. And that's kind of the way I've been thinking about it, Mike.
No, that's kind of what I responded to Fox. And I was saying, Donald Trump's major problem right now is as I've been saying, Joe Biden has a polling problem that does not show up on election day. Donald Trump has an election day problem that does not show up in the polling. He is still losing. Donald Trump is still losing 20% of the Republican vote to Nikki Haley, who dropped out 5 weeks ago. You cannot walk into a general election as he is doing with 20% of your voters not with you. You cannot lose 20% of your base. And you got trouble in the base. And that's the way we say it on campaign. Donald Trump's got trouble in the base. And it's not I don't know whether it's fixable. I think most of it is, but even if he gets half of it back, it's worse than it was 4 years ago. That's a big problem, brother. That's a big problem. And so an acquittal, I think, helps mitigate some of that Republican loss that he's experiencing. Maybe it brings a couple of independents back together. I don't know. And I don't want to go too far down this rabbit hole because we don't know what we don't know. And juries are juries. I mean, they can do absolutely anything. They can go in any direction. But I think with the expectation so high that this guy's going to be convicted, what if a surprise does come out and he does get acquitted? I think it does help him mitigate and staunch some of that bleeding, like I said.
I think there's more help for him if he gets acquitted than if he gets convicted. I don't think it surprises anybody. I don't think it makes people another. I think even smaller sliver will say, "Oh, he got convicted. I'm out." But I think that's even smaller than the other side. I think people are looking for a reason to get on board. And I'll also say this, and I'm not a dyed in the wool. All Democrats are right all the time. Y'all know that. But I do a lot of work for Democrats. Again, I'm going to go shit myself in my own mouth. But this is just a fact, is that, and it's not a Democratic talking point, it's just fact. And Mike said it when he said, we have a polling and a show up problem. Different people have different problems. We should have lost a lot of races in the last midterm. We had an election, y'all, just a year and a half ago. And Democrats should have had their ass handed to them. Inflation was at an all-time high, all these things that were going on. And Mike Madrid and other Republicans would say, yeah, Chuck, abortion and women saved your ass. And white people in the suburbs saved your ass. It wasn't Latinos, it wasn't blacks, whatever. We can have that conversation or debate. But what you can't argue is in places where we fought for that, Democrats overperformed what they historically had done. And then also in the last election, Joe Biden won, even though he only won by a little bit. I think that in my mind is Mike's got Trump's election day problem, is that Democrats continue to win when they're supposed to be losing. But these polls are horrible for Biden because when you talk to people, I don't want to put words in Mike's mouth, but I've never heard it done that way, where there's a polling problem for one candidate and there's an election day problem for another candidate. Right, Mike? Did I explain that right? Did I have it right?
Yeah, and they're reversed for different reasons.
Right.
Joe Biden has not demonstrated any problem on election day. The guy's winning these primaries by like 90%. That's not a problem. That's a base intact going forward. But his polling shows him at half of that. Not half of that in the primary, but these polls show that he's got this significant problem in the polling. The election day results are not showing that. They're not. Really anywhere, even Michigan, I would argue. Donald Trump's problem is the exact opposite. And what I attribute it to is I believe that the coalitions are really shifting. I believe that in the 2020 midterms, Republican voters saved Joe Biden's ass. That's what it was. You had an older, whiter, more Republican electorate that broke stronger for the Democrats. Why? You had white Republican college-educated people, women in the burbs tapping out, saying, I've had it with these guys to get rid of abortion rights. That's the last straw. I'm done. And they've been leaving since 2016 anyway. It just hit overdrive. And Latinos, and again, we can debate this all day long, Latinos maintain their high levels of support for Republicans. So what does that mean? It means that Latinos, a lower information, younger, poor voter, which is polling historically high for Republicans right now. If you told me 6 years ago, although I was predicting this in 2012, if you told me as a younger man that there would be a time when Donald Trump would be getting 44% of the Hispanic vote in polling, you can argue about the methodology you want, but it's the same damn methodology we've been using for 25 years, was going to be getting 44% of the vote, I tell you that you're crazy. And we got to remember, in 2020, the same year that Donald Trump loses to Joe Biden, highest turnout in the history of this country, Republicans pick up a dozen congressional seats. That has never happened before in my lifetime, where a high turnout election benefits the Republicans. And so you've got to remember, midterms are lower turnout affairs. All these special elections Democrats are winning, lower turnout affairs. That's when high information, more educated, college educated, more white voters show up. When lower educated brown faces start showing up, that has traditionally benefited Republicans. I don't think that's the case anymore. I think Republicans are going to start benefiting from high turnout elections. Democrats are going to start benefiting from low turnout elections. at all of the traditional way of doing all these GOTV operations that the Democrats specifically have set up in these communities ain't going to work anymore. They're not. And that's why I keep going. You can set up as many offices as you want in Texas, set up as many offices you want, Latino districts in Nevada and Arizona. That ain't a show of strength anymore. You're turning out Republican vote. Have at it. And I think that the Democrats got to be really careful about the way that they've approached Latino voters. Obviously, I've been very vocal about that, because all that the Republicans have to do at this point is create the permission structure. These goofy Donald Trump ads with Latinos dancing around in Miami and playing cumbias and salseros and stuff. It's working more than people realize. And then you got the Biden people, the Democrats coming in with, what's the silver bullet argument? Let's run an abortion ad with an Iraq veteran with his 5-year-old daughters on the couch. And it's like, what the hell are you even talking about? Meanwhile, you got Donald Trump dancing and eating a taco bowl, and it's working. And it's because I'm not saying that the Republicans are genius here. I'm saying they're too dumb. They're so dumb that they can't get in their own way and screw it up the way Republicans normally do. They're just too dumb. So I don't know. I mean, we could probably end on that long diatribe if you want. I think Mike Madrid finally got the rust shaken out of my wheels and my brain to start thinking about this. But I have been getting a lot of calls from reporters talking about what a Trump acquittal might mean, just because they got to have their stories prepped at the last minute. And I wanted to see if your instinct was the same as mine. And I think we're probably reading this the same way.
Well, we all know that all I really care about is the Chuck Rocha acquittal on whatever I'm going to be accused of at any point in my life. So that's what the American people really want to know about. And for all of you listening, thanks for tuning in this week to the Latino Vote podcast. Me and Mike are happy to bring that to you every week. Like us, share us. And I don't mean like us, send Mike Madrid love letters like all of y'all do. That means actually go to the app and hit the like button, give a review. It's fine in your reviews if you want to talk about how much better Chuck Rocha sounds on radio than Mike Madrid. Yeah. Call your mama. Tell everybody that you love them. There's too much hate in the world out there. Mike Madrid is an ugly ass Republican and I'm a mean ass Democrat, and we can figure out how to get along, then you can figure out how to get along. And until next time, that's the Latino Vote podcast.